Hi everyone, it's Richard Harris here at Sales Hacker, Director of Sales Training and Consulting. Very glad to have you, but we're also very excited to have Jacqueline Klein, who's one of the co-founder at Grow Labs. I'm super excited about this because I actually did a product tour this week with Grow Labs, so I could really dive in and understand their product. So I think what you're about to learn from them, because this is not a product pitch, but I can tell you what you're going to learn from them comes from some amazing stuff that they've been doing with themselves. So before we jump into everything, you sort of know my routine. First of all, please go into the chat feature if you want to be social. Share your thoughts with the group. Everyone can see your comments there. Introduce yourself. Tell us how big your sales team is, etc. Also, as we go through presentations and webinars, we'd love for you to interact with us live and in the moment. So in the questions feature, feel free to pop a question in there, and we will do our best to get those answered as quickly as possible. Our goal is to try and do questions as they come up, not waiting to the end, because when we wait to the end, it could be 20 minutes later, and that question may no longer feel as relevant as it did in the moment. So without any further ado, let me take a minute and introduce Jacqueline Klein, who's the co-founder and head of products at Grow Labs, which is a B2B lead gen outbound sales automation platform. She's got several years experiencing managing outbound strategies for early stage startups, and now uses this knowledge of sales along with her passion for product to design solutions for teams. So Jacqueline, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Hey everyone, just want to say thanks for joining the presentation, and I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Well, so I'm going to ask the first obvious question, right? This is Sales Hacker. So your LinkedIn profile says that you define yourself as a product person and co-founder. What's your
correct
with product as it relates to scaling sales, right? I'm glad to have somebody different. Like, I think it's wonderful that we're having a different title or role that we normally have. So can you help us figure out how you combine those two?
Sure. I'm definitely going to get into some of my background and career trajectory in a second, but basically design and sales and marketing are very much, two sides of the same coin. It's a lot about being very strategic, a very strategic thinker, and problem solving. And, my background is in sales and marketing, and working a lot with small teams at small tech companies. I really loved the idea of being able to be really strategic about an actual product, as well as, how you get it to market. But design thinking is something that, in my opinion, can be applied to so many different aspects of a business. And that's kind of, actually going to be infused in a lot of the things that I discussed today. It's just about being very strategic and intentional in everything that you do.
Great. That's awesome. So let's go ahead and get started then. I'll sort of turn it over to you.
For sure. Thanks a lot. As Richard mentioned, I'm going to be talking about, sales operations for B2B businesses. But more specifically, we're going to talk about, tips to build, or rather, I like to put it as designing an effective sales machine for your company. At Grow Labs, the sales process that we have is generating $35,000 of qualified opportunities per day per sales rep. And I'm going to get more into how we're actually doing that in a little bit. But before we get started, just want to give you a quick little background about myself. I'm originally from Toronto. I now live in San Francisco. About 7 years ago, I started as, I started as a first employee, you can see at the bottom here, at a web ticketing startup called Universe. And during my time there, I helped create our outbound growth strategy, and I did a lot of the selling as well. And then, the efforts of our small team resulted in us acquiring 32,000 event organizers in 3 years, which was really a huge success for us. And eventually our growth in our technology led to Universe being acquired by Ticketmaster Live Nation in 2015. And then I spent some time as a growth manager at a design firm called Cooper in the Bay Area, helping grow their education arm and professional development. And during that time, I learned a lot about design, fell in love with it, and at that point decided to kind of shift my strategic focus to product instead of actually doing sales myself. Then I did some product design consultation, some freelancing for a little while in the Bay Area for different startups, and eventually got met up again with one of the founders of Universe, who I used to work with, and now I work with him again at Grow Labs, and co-founded this business called that works on basically B2B sales automation and lead generation, and that's where I head up design. So that's about me. So basically today, we're going to split this webinar into 5 different sections. There's a lot to cover, so if I move too fast, feel free to let Richard know. I can try and slow down. Let me know if you want to pause on any specific slides. But basically, the overall theme of this presentation is emphasizing the importance of being very, very strategic and organized throughout every step of your process. And you know, the earlier on that you can adopt this sort of strategic mindset, the better every step is going to be in your process. So we're going to focus mostly on the importance of segmentation and efficiency. So we're going to identify, who are your most attractive markets and microsegments. Then we're going to establish channels to acquire leads in each market. And then we're going to customize the messaging for each market and talk about how you can do that in different ways. And then learn about how we can set up efficient sales funnels, and then how, obviously, we're going to need to measure and optimize and scale that. So this is maybe overwhelming to look at first, but it's basically the framework or the sales machine that we have designed internally at Grow Labs that has been very successful for us thus far. But basically, this is a framework that's enabling us to generate over $35,000 of qualified pipeline every day for all of our sales reps. So the first piece of this, what looks like a funnel, this framework, is identifying your most attractive markets and splitting them into what we call microsegments, and being able to rank them by importance and value that they're going to bring, and size of the addressable markets themselves. This step is absolutely imperative to any business, and if you can identify the various use cases of your offering and who is going to get the most value from it, that's going to cause some problems throughout the journey. So every step of your process in sales is affected by this first section, is needing to understand who your microsegments are.
So,
sure.
Question for you, right? Because I think a lot of us talk about this, ICP or ideal customer profile, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are doing a good job of trying to figure out who their targets are, but can you really hone in on what you mean by this micro segment? Are you talking down to the title, down to the role? What does that really mean, as you guys talk about it?
Mm-hmm. I definitely have some slides on this coming up a little bit later, but at a high level, you want to understand the value that you bring, first of all. So that could be more than one value. We help you save time. We help you identify more leads to reach out to. We can help you, all the things that that you can help a business do. So all the different value propositions that your business has. That is number one. From there, you also want to look at people's needs. So what are the problems you're solving, and who has those problems? And from there, then you can get more granular in understanding the various niches that those people fall under. So yes, that could involve job function, and not necessarily exactly the exact job title, but you want to understand the departments or the types of teams that would benefit from what you're offering. As well as other firmographic data that can then be identified. You want to find trends basically amongst these individuals, what is tying them together into one niche, whether that be what their need is or what they do, the size of the company, how much budget they have annually. So all of these things kind of tie together to create a formula, but I will definitely get more detailed about this formula in a little bit.
Great, thanks.
No problem. So just to touch on this a little bit more, so my co-founder is advising many B2B companies in the Bay Area, and what we realized throughout this, and also I'm personally surprised by it, is that when talking to a lot of these companies, a lot of them are lacking a specific understanding of their clients and their specific needs. So interestingly enough, to tie it back to the whole design thing. The issue, blind selling or selling based on broad assumptions is very similar to the product design process where teams are designing software around an idea, but they don't necessarily know who exactly they're designing it for or why, which means if you lack a specific direction, chances are you're not going to be able to offer anything that resonates with your specific, potential clients in a significant or meaningful way. And that is where you're going to find the biggest issues. So, you want to have go-to-market strategies that are focused, and that means they're going to be like high performing. So you need to basically come up with a customer segmentation strategy. It's very, very important, especially as you're entering a growth stage and you're looking to scale. You have to have a complete understanding of who your customers could be, and then implement that and infuse it into the rest of your sales process. So benefits of having, your microsegments and your various ideal customer profiles. It's going to increase your conversion. The more focused your messaging is and it's customized to each segment, that's going to result in higher credibility, higher engagement, and ultimately better conversion rates. Improve financial efficiency. Offering the right product to the right type of customers at the right price is going to increase your revenue and allow you to spend less time on less lucrative markets. So make sure you're focused on the right things. If you're focusing on markets that are probably less interested, or there's like higher competition for that market, you could be spending time somewhere else that's more worth your time. Snowball effects, which I find really interesting. You're gonna increase the impact within a specific segment because the more you focus on a segment, you're gonna have a lot more clients in that segment, and your prospects within that segment are going to be impressed, or they're going to trust you more because you work with companies that they're aware of in their industry. So that could also be spread by word of mouth and referrals, and you're going to be able to put logos on your website that they can recognize. So being able to focus on these little markets is going to help with that snowball effect. And to tie back to the whole product strategy, the more you understand these micro segments and the more you work with them, you're going to understand their specific needs and their specific pain points. And that is going to be part of that loop that ties back to helping the company at a higher level refine its offering, as well as helping it differentiate itself as a leader in that segment. Because if you're finding trends that a lot of different prospects or potential clients are telling you that they need, so like, oh, well, we'd love to be able to do this, or this is a current problem that we're facing, you're going to be able to move faster to satisfy those needs with your product and therefore potentially differentiate yourself from competition. So it's super important. So now I want to talk about what's called value-based segmentation. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but essentially you're going to want to understand what is basically the biggest question that you want to be answering in your thought process is, what is the value or values that we bring to our customers? And once you can understand that, you can identify clients who will be willing to pay for that value. So the other question you're going to want to ask is, what problems are we solving, or who faces these problems, or like what are their needs, and are we able to fill those gaps? So to give you an example, so back at Universe, the ticketing app that I mentioned, one of our segments was big conference organizers, so like people who organize gigantic conferences. So one of the issues that we were able to identify is that they sell so many tickets at such a high volume that their website would crash, and then obviously people would get really mad at them, and if they sell out within minutes, people who thought they were going to get tickets and then didn't end up complaining. So this is a huge pain point, is basically the web traffic and the high volume. So we knew that they would be more likely to pay for a solution that is valuable to them and that solves this problem. So we know that our product was able to process high volumes of ticket sales. We had specific features that would really cater to that exact issue.
Has everyone lost her, or is it just me?
What? Are you lost?
Yep, here we go. I lost you.
Oh, at what point?
right after you started talking about the website would crash or the servers would crash.
Oh, that's funny. Weird coincidence. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, we're good.
Okay, great. So, yeah, so they had an issue of, they had high volume and their servers were crashing or the website's crashing, people are getting mad. We know one of the values that we brought at the time was that we were able to process huge volumes of tickets, and we had specific features basically designed for like high volume and scaling like huge demand of ticket sales in a small period of time. So we're able to reach out to that sort of persona or customer profile of a big conference organizer and say like, hey, we're able to like do ABC, like these things that are helpful for processing large amounts of tickets, and that is a customer who's going to be likely to stick with us for a while because we are we're adding a huge amount of value in solving a big problem for them. In contrast, we may have another ideal customer profile who sells, tickets for very small events. So, I organize events for like 10 to 50 people, and obviously we wouldn't tell them the value that we can solve this problem of, managing high volumes of ticket sales, right? That doesn't make sense for them. But we also know another value that we bring is we have some marketing tools built into this ticketing platform that help people sell more tickets. So that is what we would say to a smaller event organizer. So we know that that's another ideal customer profile of ours, is someone who would like promote small workshops or organize small workshops. So we have another reason to reach out to them with a different value. Does that make sense?
Completely.
Great. So the process in which you might do this is you're going to come up with your hypothesis. So this is where you start with your high-level assumptions as to which benefits your customers will get from your product. So what are your various benefits? Then you're going to generate a list of all your clients and your customers and the date, basically any data that you have about them. You're going to analyze that data and group the customers then into ideal customer profile. So from that, you should be able to identify some trends amongst the people who have worked with you. Or if you don't have this data yet, of course, you can kind of start with that value-based hypothesis and then do some research. Talk to people who are, at the top or like who have created your product from scratch, and they'll have in mind, they've designed this with somebody in mind. So at least you have your design personas to start with, and understanding like who are your potential users, and then you can kind of build it out from there by testing various messaging with different groups and seeing the success rate. And then you're going to want to evaluate the attractiveness of each segment, and you can do that in various ways, but one might be the addressable market size. So you found out through all this data that this particular segment could really use our product, but if it's such a small addressable size, perhaps it's not worth focusing on yet. You want to probably put your efforts on a market size, unless the market size could be extremely lucrative and like your contracts, even though it's a small addressable size, the contracts could be huge. That's another consideration, but these are the types of variables that you need to be thinking about when making that decision.
So, Jacqueline, I want to dig in on the ICP, right? Like I think, and maybe it is the same everywhere, right? Like the things most people look for, I think, are, how big is the company? What's their revenue? Their employee size? What are the specific titles? Yes, I do think that, and those titles are always related back to the pains, which you talked about earlier. In all your research and all that you've done, have you found like these other little, I don't know, these hidden gems of like, well, gosh, here's something that we should put in our ideal customer profile that we never thought about? Like, and I'd just love to share a couple of them if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So one really interesting criteria or attribute in a customer profile, for example, could be the technologies that they use. So this could be actually a very strong signal for you to be targeting a group of people who use a particular technology. So, for example, we may find that a lot of the people that we're targeting happen to use Stripe as their merchant processor, and maybe your offering is something that integrates really well with Stripe, or it's something that is like Stripe in your product or offering really complement each other for a specific industry or specific user persona. So technologies used can actually be a really strong signal in your ideal customer profile. Another one could be like platforms that have really high traffic, so like rating them based on their Alexa rank, certain things like that. So these are not particularly super obvious attributes that you may think of right away, but definitely worth digging into and investigating those further.
So, and again, I know it's a loaded question that's coming from Raj, but I think it's a good question is, as you look at this data analysis, sometimes your data can only be as good as the information in your CRM. So how do you manage the data that you have versus the data that you need to go research, and what kinds of places can you find that data?
Right. So if you happen to have unfinished data in your CRM, it's like it's outdated or it's missing information about that company. There are actually many ways that you can enrich your existing data. I know at Grow Labs that we have that ability. You can look through your Salesforce, like look at a specific profile of someone and see if your current data matches, see if the data that you have matches the data that is most current and available. So you want to see if you're up to date or not. There's other methods out there as well for data refreshment. So that's something you might want to look into. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Sometimes it goes silent, so I'm not sure if you hear me or not. So that's one. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Awesome. All right. So back to evaluating the attractiveness of a segment. So of course you want to understand like the number of companies that meet your criteria set, the profit per company, the likelihood for these types of companies to convert or work with you. The targetability, so how easy is it to find and target this market? So certain ideal customer profiles are just going to be really difficult to identify, whether that be through manual or automated prospecting. Their information just may not be super available, or there are certain industries who just they don't find it important to be online. And it's gonna require like high creativity to really like find them. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and we've got another great question coming in from Rich, which is their product. He says his product presents value to tons of different groups, right? And he's concerned that how do you manage when you've got 30 different ICPs, right? To a certain extent, I think Grow Labs, yes, you guys could go after every sales team in the world, but you still have to sort of hone that down a little bit to get smarter about your segmentation, right? What do you do when you have so many people you could target? How do you choose?
Yeah. Well, so for one, there definitely are ways to scale that. So knowing, like, yes, it sounds daunting, like, oh, I have like 30 different segments, what do I do? There are ways to, if you automate like big pieces of the product that are like typically super, manual and tedious for your team, finding ways to automate a large set of those tasks that make it difficult to work in such a large scale, that's one way. And we can talk about that more in a little bit. That's something Grow Labs focuses on a lot, is basically helping to automate the segmentation and outbound process. You want to come up with your own type of formula to help you prioritize those audiences or those ideal customer profiles. So if you have 30, that's a really awesome problem to have, first of all. So that's great. Being able to identify them, you're going to want to analyze like the the like addressable market of each of those different segments and the likelihood of each of those segments to convert. Who has the biggest pain points that most closely match what your values are, and are they easy to find online? Are they easy to identify? Is it easy for you to find those prospects?
Right.
All of these things should factor in to making that decision.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple of things in too. One is if you've got a list of 30, heck, if you've got a list of 7 people that you can target, you should force rank them. Probably the easiest 2 things to do that are around one, overall revenue based on historical purchases, meaning is it a new target market you're going after versus an old one that you sort of started to own, and make sure you own those top 3 or 4. That's the first thing that I would encourage people to do. The other thing is to also wrapped around that sort of revenue piece is the seasonality of the business. For example, I worked for a company once where we sold into billion-dollar retail organizations. Well, we knew we couldn't call Macy's and Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's from about maybe August or September through the end of the year, because all they're doing is focusing on the holidays. If stuff isn't sort of in their website at that point, they're not going to touch code. So sort of trying to wrap around your forced rankings around with any level of seasonality, I think also helps you just figure out when and where to target people as much as it does, which people to target. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely, timing and time sensitivity could play a huge role in your decision-making process.
That's great. Yeah. Okay.
So basically, you want to reiterate this process until you identify, your key microsegments. So this, I guess, ties back into what we were just discussing and all these variables and decision-making process that is involved. You're going to eventually come to something where you feel more confident, and to help you identify what you should be confident about are these things like they should be easily identifiable, and you should be able to target them with unique and precise messaging. So basically, if you can't think of exactly what you would say to a specific target market to convince them to work with you, then you probably need some more refining of your segment. So it becomes like a user persona that you can actually have a conversation with in your head. Like, hey, this is why you would use us. It's going to be helpful for these reasons. We've worked with other similar companies before. If you can think of them, that'd be awesome. And just being able to easily walk through that in your head is probably a good sign that you've identified something that's actually going to help you be successful.
That's great. So we have another question coming in also from Raj, and he says, he's identified target markets that gain value from his proposition, but do you have any insight into how we can identify the names of the customers in the target markets and also ensure that they're targeting the customers who are in the right buying cycle? So I think I think we all have that challenge. When is the right buying cycle for everybody? But how do you sort of go from, okay, I've identified here's my hypothesis of my markets, into here are the companies, and then here are the people. And it sounds a little bit like, how do I test my hypothesis, and how much should I test it before I decide if I'm ready to accept the results of the hypothesis, meaning, yep, this is someone we should go after, or no, this isn't?
There's many ways you can do that. There's a few steps involved I'm pretty sure that I'm addressing the question correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong, but, there's the how and the when, right? So the how is, how am I going to find people to talk to? We've identified the who, meaning like who you're looking for at a high level. If you want to know who are the actual people, there are many ways to run, very, very granular searches. You want to find people based on a very specific criteria set that you have identified. For example, Grow Labs has a lead gen tool where you can type in a bunch of search criteria, and we are able to find leads that match those profiles. From there, you want to have some conversations, obviously. So you're gonna potentially reach out to, let's say, give yourself, a month to reach out to like hundreds of people. But I mean, if you can reach out to hundreds of people and get some positive replies coming back to you, that's a good sign. And then having actual conversations, whether they be face-to-face or on the phone or doing a demo with this ideal customer profile, you'll learn so much so fast. You know, if there's a good fit, and you're reaching out to a large scale of them, you will find a trend quickly. The more people you talk to, obviously, the more you'll learn whether or not it's a good fit. And you know, if you see a lot of people saying, you know, we're not, you know, we already use this, or this is too expensive for us. You know, these are things you're going to have to reconsider. Like, oh, maybe this market is too saturated with a competitive product, or if that's the case, then like, what can we do to our offering that's going to help us get these people to convert to our solution instead? There's so many variables there, obviously, but I think really it's all about just getting in front of people and talking. Having conversations is by far the most important step, because you're going to learn so much from the people who you would like to work with.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm not, if anyone is familiar or has any experience in the past with Facebook advertising, you may know or be familiar with the term lookalike segments or lookalike audiences, and that actually applies closely to prospecting as well. So brainstorming lookalike microsegments basically means, are there other customer profiles that are very similar to the ones you've already been successful with? That could be good targets for you. So, you know, if you have already worked with, you know, a company that is, you know, you've already identified small marketplaces that use Stripe is a microsegment. Then you could research other payment processors like Magenta or OpenCart that may or may not have, so those companies may or may not have like similar pain points, and it could be a good fit. So it's kind of just like finding common ground. It's not going to be the exact same, but it's going to be probably similar enough to some of the attributes you're already found success with, and you know, testing those out to see if they are good targets as well. So this is just a screenshot of our internal ideal customer profile segmenting. So this is actually shot from Grow Labs itself, but you can see the column where it says audience name. We've basically created these segments. So the segments are pretty narrow. We typically split the segments into 2 or 3 groups based on the decision maker. So we'll specifically just reach out in what audience to the C-levels versus the VP of sales. And the reason why we do this is because the value prop is going to be different for each of those individuals or levels within the companies. Yeah. And other examples, like we'll reach out to a marketing agency, or we'll just reach out to e-commerce companies that use Stripe, or we'll reach out, it's also location-based, as you can see, so like UK, Ireland. So the messaging for all of these is going to be unique and like written specifically for them.
So what do you feel like, you know, again, this is kind of like the holy grail of lead gen, right? This tailoring the messages and getting the positive responses, et cetera. You know, what have you learned about getting better at this, right? What have you learned about this customization or hyper customization versus sort of customization?
What have I learned about getting better at this? Meaning like the process, or?
Yeah, just whether it's the process or making sure that you're being hyper personal, as you were sort of suggesting.
Yeah, you definitely see better results when you are, the more you personalize something, the more it's going to resonate with the person on the receiving end. If you're sending an email out to somebody that's like, hey, name, you know, this is I'm blah, blah, blah from this company, we do this, and like, when I say this, it's just like the broad statement of what your company does. I would love to like have a conversation and see if it would be a good fit. Versus like, hi, name, my name is blah, blah, blah from company. We work with event organizers of very large conferences. For example, this conference, this conference, or this conference, and help, and then, you know, help, and then you're saying whatever problem you're solving, maybe 3 of them, and then, you know, starting a conversation around that, which is, super personalized and really speaks to them, is going to, there's no doubt that it's going to have a better response rate than a blanketed approach.
Great. How do you define the lead, right? This is another question coming in from the audience, because lead means so many things these days, right?
Yeah, it depends what platform you're using, I guess.
If they have a pulse and they walk by the booth, they're a lead.
Right.
How have you guys gotten better at that? I mean, I think I know the answer, but obviously you're the guest. So, what is your perspective?
How are we better at identifying what defines a lead?
Yeah.
To me, a lead is someone who will A, fits your ideal customer profile, and B, is willing to at least have a conversation with you. And that's, you can send out an email to somebody and they can say, now's not the best time, maybe let's talk in 6 months, which isn't the most exciting response to get, but that person is 100% a lead. You are going to still have a conversation with them, whether it be now or 6 months from now, but you know that there's a gleam of hope. You can have a conversation.
There's definitely, and I've talked about this a couple times, there's sort of suspects and prospects. So leads fall into one of those two buckets. They're a suspect. If you've got a list, those are just suspects. And granted, if you're using Salesforce, you have to call it a lead. But that's why you have lead statuses, at least in that CRM. So I think to answer that question is understand there's kind of two kinds of leads. There's the suspect and there's the prospect. And once someone responds to you, they've become a prospect. So even if they say no, they're still a prospect.
That's right.
All right, let's go continue. I know we keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's fun to keep it interactive. So basically now that we've covered how to segment the market and get your microsegments, I want to look at another really important piece, which is establishing the channels that you're going to use to acquire these leads. We often will get questions like, which channel should I be using? Should I use inbound or should I use outbound? Should I use email or should I use ads or should I go to a lot of conferences or should I work with influencers and run social media campaigns? The answer is probably all of the above, but the thing is that each channel has pros and cons and that differs for each company. So it's really the true answer is that you should be evaluating each channel based on different criteria and coming to a conclusion and prioritizing those channels internally. This is a blurred out matrix that we've created internally at Grow Labs. This is, we are biased towards outbound. That's one major thing that our product does, but it's also where we've seen the best results, both in terms of ROI, but also speed to market. So being able to scale super fast and test your hypothesis very fast as well. Back at Universe, 85% of the new business came from outbound email campaigns. At Grow Labs, it's about 60% of where our new business comes from. And email campaigns and leads that we generate through our own platform. But what you definitely want to do is evaluate the channels, figure out what the pros and cons are for each segment, and then you'll be able to implement a go-to-market strategy for each of those. So you can see the greens are probably, positives, yellow is probably, maybes, not great, and red is just kind of for example, the cost is just too high for us to blast with an ad strategy. We don't want to initially do that yet, especially because outbound can teach you a lot about who you should eventually be sending ads to. So these sort of things will help you decide the priority of your outbound channels or inbound or any sales channels for that matter.
Well, by the way, we're getting a ton of questions, so I want to try and answer them, but I also want to make sure that you get through all your stuff. How are you doing do you think we're doing with time and questions?
I think it's 11:40, so I'd love to just be able to kind of get through the rest of the slides and then see how much time we have at the end. Plus, if any of you have any follow-up questions, I'll display my email address at the end of the presentation, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me with any questions that you have.
Sounds good. Keep the questions coming. So we'll hold the rest of them for now so we can get through the presentation, because it's a good one, I promise.
Great. So to focus on outbound email campaigns, which is our #1 priority for our sales channels. Basically, what you can do is, so once you have each microsegment, for each of those you want to find the companies that match the microsegment's criteria. You want to figure out who the decision makers are at these companies, and you're going to want to have your blacklisted. So you want to blacklist your existing clients and your competitors and anyone that you've previously reached out to, and you want to blacklist them based on their email and the domain and the company name. So basically you want to say like, hey, I'm starting to do all this lead generation work, and I'm going to be doing all this outbound email. I want to make sure I'm not reaching out to anyone that I shouldn't be reaching out to at this point. Like, I don't want to bother people I've already spoken with. I don't want to seem like I'm disorganized in my communication to people who I've already communicated with. So that's a very, very important step. You want to decide the maximum number of contacts at each company that you'd like to engage with. We recommend maximum of 3 individuals from each company. So you have your account-based strategy going on with different touch points at a company, but you don't want to overload it unless you're targeting like different departments with different value propositions. In that case, it would be fine. But within like one department, you don't want to like reach out to like 20 people, because that's just going to appear like you don't know what you're doing, you're disorganized, and you're kind of spammy, and that kind of definitely leads to a loss of credibility. So you want to avoid that at all costs.
Do you really see that? Like, I think if you're going after a company and it's a huge company, go after 8 or 10 people. Do you guys really see that you lose that level of credibility?
We've definitely had situations where, I've seen this happen at Universe, where, you don't want people to get frustrated with you. And if they notice that, if they bring you up at a meeting or to a colleague and you realize like, oh yeah, well, they also sent the exact same email to this person and this person and this person, and like, it's clearly not genuine then, or, it's kind of, they're being, I don't know, it can come across as negative. If you do want to engage with that level or that high volume of people from the same company, you have to make sure you're being very, very smart about it, and you're like sending different messaging depending on who the different individuals are. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of consideration to have there. You can't just do it.
For me, it seems hyper-personalization, and you sort of have 2 or 3 cadences for the same company so that they're not getting email at the same time. So, but I agree with you. You do have to have a certain number at some point.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then, you want to also decide who will be reaching out to the prospects. You could do that based on like what territories that they're in, what industries, or the size of the account. So you may have different sales team members that have different focuses, so that's going to be part of the decision process of who to assign specific leads to or prospects to. Okay, great. So this is another screenshot from Girl Labs, but basically this is an example of running a search for one particular audience or one particular ideal customer profile. So you have your segment, and it has specific criteria such as location and industry, company size, funding raise, the technologies that they use. When we target specific people at each company, we want to make sure that they match the microsegment, and that if we're targeting C-level executives versus another one where we target a VP of sales operations, we would create 2 separate searches for that entirely. Our database has over 320 million prospects in it, and through this screen, you'd actually end up, instantly matching a bunch of leads based on that criteria. And finally, for each microsegment, for outbound email campaigns, you're going to want to first draft a series of outbound emails, which we call a sequence. And that is basically a series of emails that are sent out over a period of time. The timing between the emails varies, but it basically pays attention to certain cues like, oh, have they opened the email? Have they clicked the link on the email? Are they out of office? All of these things to consider are done automatically. So you're drafting your series of outbound emails. You're going to run like A/B test you want to A/B test the timing of each email, like what is the best time of day to send, or what is the best day of the week to send emails, when are people most receptive, and you're going to want to A/B test the content of the emails as well. So, you may send 2 different versions of an email campaign to one microsegment to see what resonates with them best. So as you can see, we have a few different sequences here. So we actually will create one sequence for one microsegment so that they each have totally unique messaging. And then you may A/B test them and basically decide which one is most successful, and then stick with that. And you can always, iterate and optimize more in the future. So outbound email sequences should contain probably 6 to 8 emails. And that's because on average it takes up to potentially 6 touch points to get a response from a cold lead. So definitely do not give up after 2. This is a trend, especially when it's a manual process. You send an email and you give yourself a reminder to follow up after 7 days if they don't reply. But to continue that manual process for however long it takes for them to reply, people tend to get discouraged. But if you set up an automated campaign that's at least 8 touch points, it's kind of like a set it and forget it sort of situation. And that way, you have a higher chance of people finally replying to you potentially after 6 emails, which is it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested. It just means that they're busy, or it took a few emails for them to become interested. So it's definitely an important part of an outbound strategy to set up a sequence of automated emails. Okay, so what this basically is talking about the different types of content that you can include in an email sequence. Of course, you can have your introduction email where you just say a little bit about your company and help build some credibility. Then you can have your follow-up emails where you're kind of just checking in, trying to help build that FOMO or fear of missing out aspect, really trying to engage them in reasons why they should be interested in having a conversation with you soon. There's other things that you can also include in these emails. It's just you always want to find reasons to send more touch points, and you don't want to be too repetitive and just be like, hey, just checking in, hey, just checking in, hey, can we talk, can we talk, can we talk? Try and find ways to actually add value throughout that journey as well. So if you can provide a case study that they can look at, or an ebook, that sort of engagement may also help keep them interested in continuing to either open your emails or actually reply to you eventually.
Yeah, I have a question. So this looks like this 8 emails over. Is this 8 touches over 60 days? Is that about what this cadence this particular sequence looks like?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I would reiterate, and I say this all the time to folks about this, adding value. The smartest thing you can do at any part of your cadence is to add value by asking for nothing in return. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a tip that's worked really well for me and a couple of my clients. I've put a subject line of thinking of you, and then you put in the body. It's like, hey, here's a case study. It reminded me of you. I thought you'd find it interesting. Talk, That's it. And don't say, how can I get on your calendar, or when can I talk to you? Ask for nothing. Just give them the case study with nothing in return.
Yeah.
And for me, it really adds a lot of value. I mean, you can get
it also comes across as more genuine.
That's what I mean. Yeah. You come across authentic, like you care.
Yes.
Which you do. So. Exactly. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I'm going to try and get through the rest of this without speeding too much. So outbound email tips, like we were just saying, emails should sound as personal and authentic as possible. The prospect you'll be emailing should feel like each email was manually crafted for them by a sales rep. So the email is coming from a sales rep. Even if it's automated, it still should be coming from their email address and signed by their name with their email signature. And it should, it should sound conversational with, the tone of it should be conversational. It shouldn't sound like this, robot advertising machine is trying to reach out to them. Nobody really likes to talk to a robot. I know things are changing in this, day and age, but in an email, people are getting better and better basically at identifying things that are not authentic. So it's very important that your messaging comes across as conversational and human. You want to keep your emails short. Attention spans are short these days. The less words used to get your point across, the better. Keep them simple. You don't want to use too much jargon. You also don't want to add a bunch of graphics and things to your email that make them seem like they were not just handcrafted. The more graphics in an email, the more that they appear as a marketing email rather than a one-to-one outreach. If I'm reaching out to you, I'm not going to send you like a flyer, for example. Create fear of missing out, so using language that makes your offering sound exclusive and intriguing. You want to build credibility. You want to avoid making super blunt statements like, we're the best company ever, or we're like the #1 of this, or the best of this. That kind of just makes you sound like everyone else, because that's what a lot of different companies are saying to try and get people's attention. So to be more unique and to build credibility, try to include instead actual relevant data points and clients' names and case studies of success stories that you've already had. And of course, to add back to like the human authenticity element, using your own voice and style is super important. You don't want to copy and paste every word from a template. Templates can be really helpful starting points, but the more that you can customize and tweak them to be your own, the better and the more genuine you will come across. So here I'm going to go quickly through just some template screens, like introduction emails that you could start with. Everywhere that you see orange are opportunities to personalize or tailor a template for a specific microsegment. So you're going to be able to say, we work with these types of companies and help them do this main benefit. And we help them do this by, we do this feature, we do this feature, we do this feature. And all of these, you can have so many different versions of them for your company, because they will be based on your value and then also the needs that you're filling. So this is kind of like a model that can be adjusted for each microsegment. And then there's a few other follow-up emails. You guys will have access to this later, so I don't want to go too much into the wordiness of each template, but you just want to find ways to be really concise and really personalized to whoever you're reaching out to and what really speak to their needs and resonate with them. Okay, and then so you reach out to everyone, you identify your leads, and then you want to efficiently move them down your funnel once you've had that touch point. So we'll just go quickly through some of the steps. Depending on your business and who you're targeting, you'll likely want to adjust this. But so setting up these efficient funnels. So having specific landing pages for each microsegment can make a huge difference in your perceived credibility and authenticity, and really having the people you're reaching out to realize, wow, this really is like built for our needs. So having landing pages that have specific segment messaging on them and showcasing the specific value proposition for that segment, and using logos of segment-specific customers and clients. So here's a quick example of Square. So Square has a landing page specifically for spas and specifically for restaurants. So these are like some of their microsegments. And there's in an email, if I'm reaching out to spas, I'm going to put the link to the spa landing page in the email so that they can go directly to this page and see exactly how Square would work for them. So that's basically that concept. And there are many different tools out there that will help you easily create landing pages, and it's not as daunting as it may sound. So I would say it's definitely worth looking into. And feel free again to ask me more questions about that later. I can help with the resources about that. Another part of the process that's super important to automate and make it more efficient is booking demos. So we use a calendar system called Calendly. For an example, and basically it allows people, like through a website or whatever link we're sending them, in the emails, they can just like click a button and, you know, say, we'll have our sales reps calendars in there, and they can choose the availability, and it will automatically schedule the demo, and it will automatically send them a confirmation email with a calendar invite, and with a link to like the conference, to the video conference, and it will automatically send follow-ups and reminders like a day before or the day of the demo, and this helps basically optimize and improve the level of no-shows that you're getting, because a huge waste of time for sales reps is like, you know, they have a demo book, they're sitting there waiting for the person to show up, and then they don't show up, and that's kind of a whole half an hour that they've been like, oh, that, you know, I could have been talking to somebody else. So finding ways to like decrease no-shows is, you know, definitely a big way to up your efficiency and decrease the amount of no-shows over time. Saving sales reps' time is very important, so that is a super useful tool for us. Another really efficient system that we use is the way that we send proposals and quotes to people that we're having conversations with. We use PandaDoc, which basically it's the e-signature. It's an e-signature platform, but it integrates really closely with Salesforce, and we are able to create these unique proposals like really quickly, send them out, have follow-ups, allows people to e-sign, and it even has like integration with Stripe, so you can collect payments that way too. So it basically is automating some of the manual process that goes into, you know, closing a deal, and the negotiation stage as well. So after all of that, you basically want to, you know, take some time and, you know, optimize the main sales funnel and measure and make sure that you're able to measure, optimize, and scale it. So on the vertical axis, you can see on the left, you'll want to measure the conversion rate and time to move from one stage to another. This will help reduce the cost and time of customer acquisition. Really important. And then on the horizontal axis at the top, you can basically see that you want to evaluate each segment and channel against each other. And as mentioned much earlier, this is one way to help you prioritize where to invest your time and money in the future. And some important sales metrics that you want to track over this period is, you know, how many opportunities have you created in the last week or this month? How many opportunities are created in this particular status in your CRM? How long is the stage duration? By source, so like, oh, I found this, you know, I found this lead through this source versus the leads that I found through this source. Like, which ones are producing like the best stage duration? Like, who's closing deals faster? You want to be recording the reason why some deals are closed lost. This will help, you know, potentially drive product decisions in the future, or, you know, your sales strategy decisions in the future. Close one source and close one average contract value, close one average contract length, average time to close. So these are super, super important sales pipeline metrics that you're going to want to track in your CRM. The earlier you can set up these, the better, because, you know, this data is super, super helpful in making decisions. And I can do a quick overview of our, you know, the metrics here at Grow Labs. So this is an average per rep over the last 30 days. So we're generating about 228 opportunities per rep per month, most coming from our outbound campaigns. 36% have converted into engaged opportunities, which is one of the most important metrics that we track, because, you know, there are opportunities that will end up converting into clients at some point. And over the first 30-day period, about a quarter moved to close one, meaning they became a client. And out of the same cohort, we expect another half to become clients within the first 90 days. So if we look at the number of engaged opportunities we generate per month per rep divided by 30 days, so here's some math, and multiplied by our average client lifetime value, we're generating actually $35,000 of qualified opportunities per day per rep, which is very exciting to us. This is, you know, our outbound working really well, and we're able to split these numbers by channel and segment to see where to invest and focus our resources the most. And, you know, as you can see at the top, outbound is working the best for us. So yeah, that's basically the sales machine. That was probably a lot to take in. But like I mentioned, feel free to email me with any questions. And I know we've kind of run a little bit over time. So Richard, if there's still any time for questions, I'm happy to do that. But if not, yeah, this has been great.
No, let's do a couple of questions.
Awesome.
That was super informative, and I'm just going to pick some questions that came in.
Okay.
So if we don't get to these, I know that we'll have Sales Hacker aggregate them and probably get them over to you, or maybe on like a Google Doc, and we'll try and share that doc out with folks or something like that. So, so one of the questions that was coming in was, as a smaller company with a small team, at what points do you go from sort of, the spray and pray, throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks, to becoming more strategic and spending more time, right? Like, I think there's always that point of inflection when you're building an organization of, right now we just need to get as many leads as we can and as many opportunities, so let's just, spray and pray. What's been your experience around that?
I think spray and pray is kind of goes against the first step, which is, have your value-based hypothesis. You can't just, spray and pray and do a blanketed approach.
Right.
It's not going to work as well as being strategic. So I would say you need to be strategic from day one, and you shouldn't just test the waters and then decide how to be strategic from there. You need to be intentional in every step of your sales process. So really understand you will have defined a few ideal customer profiles before you get started. That's number one. You shouldn't just make assumptions and let's say okay, I'm going to email every single person who works in sales in America, or in San Francisco, or in wherever you're located. That's simply just not going to bode very well, and you're going to waste a lot of time and resources doing that, when you can probably make more informed decisions earlier on, just based on understanding your value and understanding needs that you fill.
Yeah. So when you, one of the other questions that came in was, particularly for a lot of startups, right, there's this concern about what's going to go into a spam filter, particularly if you start to use a tool like Grow Labs. What are your concerns or thoughts around attachments, not having attachments, making sure you don't bombard the domain so that you don't get blacklisted, et cetera?
Of course, yeah. So these are major considerations that we have expertise in at Grow Lab. So our product is built to ensure this is not an issue. So we understand daily limits on Outbound. We know how many emails you are and are not allowed to send every day. And we ensure that limit never is exceeded. And the problem is that if that limit is exceeded, if you're trying it through your Gmail, using some sort of mail merge technology or whatever, if you're sending more than a few hundred emails a day, you're going to get blacklisted. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So there are ways around it, which is something that Grow Labs has built. But there are also, if you are using just your own domain, then there are rules in place to ensure that you're not stepping over the limits. Then there's also, the content of your emails. There's actually a lot of ways to check the spam score of your own domain, your email domain. I think it's called spamchecker.com or something. I would look into that just to see how the health of your domain is. And then there's resources out there about messaging and there's specific words and terminologies that if you include them in your emails or subject lines, they are more likely to be identified or marked as spam. So there's words basically that you want to avoid using. And I'm sure you can assume some of them get 50% off, stuff like that going into spam. And then, link tracking is actually something that could have a higher chance of being identified as spam. So we actually, we're going to probably offer it, but we're going to suggest not using it very often because those emails will probably have a lower deliverability rate. So in a lot of cases, when you are in an outbound email platform, you'll see the option to have link tracking, but it's never on by default. And that's just because it has a higher chance of going to spam. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can ensure the health of your outbound.
Got it. What about, and might as well give folks a little bit of a taste of, so what does Grow Labs actually do? You sort of hinted around it a little bit.
Yeah, great question.
Go ahead and let folks know. I think they deserve, you've earned the right to tell them. So.
Thank you. So basically, Grow Labs is a lead generation platform and an outbound email automation platform. So we basically combine lead generation and outbound sales email in one place. So what you can do, we have a database of over 350 million qualified or verified leads in our database. You can run searches. So like you're going to say, here's my ideal customer profile. It has, I'm looking for someone who has this job title in this location at a company of this size in this industry. They use this technology, and the list goes on. It gets very granular. So you run this very, specific search, and then we're able to give you back leads. And each time you do a search, you're able to say how many leads you're looking for in that case. We're able to show you like, hey, here's the estimated reach of this particular ideal customer profile in our database. So like you've searched for this and we have like 150,000 leads that match this. Here's the 200 that you've requested. And then those, you're able to come back and do searches anytime. You're able to take those leads and then you're able to put them into email sequences that you've crafted within Grow Lab. So you can say like, oh, these leads, I'm assigning it to this sales rep, and all the emails are going to go out to those leads from this sales rep. And it's going to include their name and their email signature and everything. And it's basically like you're automating the one-to-one outbound sales process in our platform. So the nice thing is that it saves a ton of time, and you're able to really scale and drive up the efficiency of things that are typically very time-consuming and very manually intensive. And the last thing that we do is, so when you're sending out all these emails and you're getting replies, one big pain point of doing outbound at scale is you'll come to work in the morning and your inbox is just like slammed with like hundreds of out-of-office notifications or people saying like, I'm not interested at all, like leave me alone or whatever it is. You're going to have to sift through all of those replies and find the people who are actually interested in having a conversation with you. And that wastes potentially hours a week. And we wanted to help sales teams avoid this. So what we do is we analyze all the responses that come through. We use machine learning to basically say, hey, this is a positive response. Send it, prioritize it in the sales rep's inbox versus, hey, we know this is an out-of-office reply, or we know that this lead is not qualified, and those ones we will, we'll label them and filter them in your Grow Labs account, but you don't necessarily have to see them in your inbox and, spend all the time to manually mark them as read or to set reminders to follow up when they're back in the office. Our software automatically will do that for you. So it saves a lot of time. We use it ourselves every day, and our reps are booked from 8 to 10 demos every single day just from our outbound campaigns, which is pretty amazing stuff.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. Well, thanks for giving us the detail on that. One last question, and then I'll let you go. So it's always fun to talk to people. Like I said, you're on the product side of things, but you're also a co-founder, and obviously, you're a woman in the co-founder space. I'm curious as to what advice you would give to anybody who's thinking of being a founder, or what advice would you go back and give yourself, as a woman telling you to go and be a founder of something? What would you like to share about that?
I think one of the number one important things when you're, growing your career and learning is you should always surround yourself with people that you have a lot of respect for and who are super, super smart and amazing at what they do. It's the best way for you to learn and to grow. You should always surround yourself with people who you think are smarter than you. And if you don't feel that way, then you should maybe consider something else. I think that is super, super essential in pushing yourself and building more ambition. And the more you learn, the more you're going to want to do. So it's kind of just about opening your eyes to what's possible. And that's definitely been my experience, is like every single day I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this. Now I want to do that. Oh, I didn't realize this. Now I want to work on that. Or, wow, like you could just learn so much. And that's probably what brought me to where I am today, is just, having the thirst to learn and wanting to be around really inspiring people. And if I could tell myself something back then, if I could tell something to anybody who's looking to start a company or go into a very early stage company, is make sure they're solving a problem that they've probably already experienced themselves. So there's a lot of companies out there who kind of will just see maybe a gap in the marketplace and do some business analysis or whatever and be like, hey, I should start a company that does this. But if you're not basing that on something that you truly have experienced yourself, maybe in a past company, like, oh, as part of my job before, I realized like, this particular thing was really difficult for us, or this took a lot of time and this was super annoying, or we were just really wish we had something that did this. This path to creating something is the most likely path to be successful. For example, Intercom. I don't know if you guys have heard of Intercom, but Intercom has done this exact same thing. Like the founders, were working in customer support, and really, or they would have their own, work in a small team at a small company, but just feel like there's no solution out there that could really support their needs to help their customers in a way that was just like easy and delightful to use. So they built exactly that, and it's killing it. Like they're doing super, super well. And I think that's part of like their magic formula, is just solving a problem that you really understand.
That's great. That is super solid advice. Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline, and thanks to Grow Labs for sponsoring this and being a part of it. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you to the audience who stuck around as we went over. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look to the next time we all talk. So thank you again, everybody.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.